welcome back to IB Spectrum. We're glad to announce the new segment to our YouTube channel, the IB DP segment. Specifically, today I'm going to be talking about the Paper 1 format for business management. We thought of introducing the paper formats before getting into the content, as it makes it a lot easier, and understanding the papers can really simplify the examination process. So as I said before, today we're going to be talking about paper 1 and we're going to go over what paper 1 is, the difference between the HL and SL paper 1. We're going to talk about some tips and tricks that can really help you and simplify the entire process, as well as we're going to break down the structure, and we're also going to look at a sample section to kind of answer. Alright, let's get into it. The introduction, starting off with the introduction, we're going to talk about what paper 1 is. So paper 1 is your pre-seen case study paper. So essentially the questions provided that will be given in the paper will be based off of a case study that will be provided before the examination itself. Typically 3 to 6 months before the exam. So in order to master this paper, the main important step is to really analyze and understand the case study before you actually write the exam. So the case study, which typically is around 3 to 6 pages long, is about a hypothetical company and its situation, and it's often based on real life stories or conditions. The case study paper is the same for both SL and HL students, but obviously the November examinations will have a different case study from the one used for examinations in May. So moving on to higher level and standard level paper 1 for business management, both SL and HL have 2 papers to attempt throughout the DP program, paper 1 and paper 2. However, under paper 1, HL students have another section to attempt. So HL students have 3 sections to attempt, SL students have 2 sections to attempt. So for SL students, paper 1 lasts for an hour and 15 minutes and the weighting is 35% of the total grade. For HL students, paper 1 lasts for 2 hours 15 minutes and the weighting is for 35% of the total grade. So the extra time given to HL students is for section C, which is not there for SL students. So the tips that I'm going to be talking about further on in the video are used and can be used by both HL and SL students, and it's really helpful to kind of make it a stress-free and simple paper to get good grades in. So let's quickly start off by breaking down the structure of this paper. So the paper itself, as I mentioned, will have 3 sections. You will have 2 markers, 4 markers, 6 markers, and 10 markers. You can also have 9 and 12 markers, but it's most commonly told that 2, 4, 6, 10 are usually the marks that are given to the questions given in paper 1. Your 2 markers are very simple to the point questions. Usually the command terms define or state will be given, and here in this case you'll be either asked to define like a business topic or state an answer to something from the case study. So these are very simple questions. You can easily bag 2 to 3 marks very easily if you are fully aware of the business terms in your business course. So the 4 markers are usually explain or describe questions. Typically, they'll ask for advantages and disadvantage questions, where they'll give a situation and they'll ask you to state the advantages or disadvantages. The question will be very to the point and it will be very simple to answer if you are aware of the advantages and disadvantages. Your 6 markers use the command terms analyze or evaluate commonly. These questions are a little bit more lengthy. They're kind of like short essays that you have to write. Here you provide full balanced arguments. So 4 markers with a little bit more explanation and you kind of go a little deeper into the theory. So again, provide your advantages, your disadvantages, your concluding statement, your introduction where you define all the terms, etc. Your 10 markers are of course a lot more longer, and these are often seen in HL papers. The command terms discuss or evaluate are commonly given for this particular 10 marker questions, and it's very important for 10 markers to connect to the case study very often. You have to refer back to the case study. So the images, the screenshots on the right kind of help simplify what I've just talked about. So here on top we see the interrelationship between case links, course theories, and so what. So essentially when you're writing an answer, these 3 points should be running through your mind at all times. So you want to start off by giving your course theories, right? Define whatever terms that are given or explain anything that they ask you to explain in the question. So this is where your business knowledge comes into play. You want to explain everything that you know in regards to the question, right? So give textbook definitions and introduce it, and then connect it back to the case links. So in your questions, they'll always state with reference to, which means in reference to the case study, you have to answer this question. So every time you give your course theories and every time you start off with your business management introduction, you always want to take it back to the case study and kind of talk about the connection, so people know, so the moderators know the relevance between your explanation and the actual case study. Now the so what question comes into play when you're talking about the effect, right? Usually the effect it has on the company or something like that. The screenshot under that kind of breaks down the 3 sections. I'm going to quickly go through it so you have a quick idea. Take a minute to pause the video to kind of read each individual section as well if you need to. So here these are for HL students. For standard students, the only difference is that section C that we see on the right hand side will be taken off, so you only have to focus on section A and B. Now for HL students, specifically section A, you have to answer 2 out of the 3 questions, and it's usually 10 marks for each question. So when you select 2 out of 3 questions, 10 into 2, which is 20, you have 20 marks for section A. Approximately spend around 40 to 45 minutes answering this section. And what do you expect for section A? Most likely a couple of questions worth 4 or 6 markers, and expect qualitative factors, definitions, connections to the case study, questions that are related to the point that require analysis. Section B, you have 1 compulsory question that is worth 20 marks, so approximately again 40 minutes. Here you have a few small questions and calculations that will be worth 10 marks, and an essay question. Now here, this is where math comes into play. A lot of the time section B includes your organizational tools concepts, where you have to either talk about, let's say for example, Gantt charts or fish and bone diagrams or something like that, that comes under your business course, but it specifically focuses on the math aspect of business, like finance and all of that. So section C for higher level students, which I mentioned previously, only for higher level students, you have 1 compulsory question to answer that is worth 20 marks in approximately 40 minutes. Here you have to make a recommendation with all the relevant information that's provided in the case study, and the moderator's rubric is similar to the QGIS model. Alright, now let's move on to the tips and tricks that I recommend to keep in mind when you are actually writing your exam. And actually these tips and tricks are very handy before you write the exam, so when you get the case study. So the first tip is to identify all key terms in the case study. So I highly recommend getting a hard copy or a soft copy of the case study which you'll receive prior to the exam, and sit and first of all start by going through it, analyzing it, examining it, and then once you're done with that, either take a highlighter and highlight all the key terms and key topics that are there. Really do a full in-depth analysis of the case study, so everything is in your mind and you don't really have to waste time going through the case study in depth when you are actually writing the paper, because you have all the information beforehand. So take a highlighter and kind of highlight all the key definitions, all the key topics, everything that you want to do a little bit more research on. Essentially highlight everything that you think is relevant in the paper where you'll get questions based off of, so that when you actually get questions based off what you highlight, it's a lot easier to actually answer and makes the whole process a lot more easier and stress-free. Secondly, produce a timeline of events to see what exactly happened and when. So I highly recommend going through the case study and then jotting down the flow of events. So what happens, when it happened, what was the effect. So again, this really breaks down the entire case study, and when you're actually writing your paper, you are aware of what happens and when it happens, and you know the flow to a point where you don't really have to go back and make references to the case study. You're already aware of everything. And it's a very easy little trick to make your answers a lot more organized and just easier, and kind of simplifies the entire process. Thirdly, produce a stakeholder map listing both internal and external stakeholders. A lot of the times, the 4 markers that you get from paper 1 explicitly ask you to either state or describe some internal or external stakeholders. So if you produce a stakeholder map beforehand, when you get the pre-seen case study, you really don't have to go and identify it in the actual exam because it will already be in your head. All you have to do is kind of explain it and describe it in your paper. Really saves a lot of time and just makes the entire process a lot easier, as I said, for the other two. Fourthly, construct a SWOT analysis and a steeple analysis to gain understanding about internal and external environments of the business. This just entirely breaks down your case study to a point where you know every single detail so that you're completely prepared and ready for any single question that comes your way. So let's say for SWOT analysis, you have mentioned all the strengths and weaknesses and threats and opportunities, so that if they ask you a question where you have to mention the advantages or the disadvantages, or maybe evaluate a decision that's made, your analysis that you've done previously will really come in handy, and you don't really have to waste a lot of your time and just kind of jot down and explain your answer. SWOT and steeple analysis is a little bit more in depth. So having both of these in handy before you go into the examination hall to write your exam can really save a lot of time and make the entire thing and simplify the process a whole lot. Moving on. List all of the problems faced by the business considering all business functions. So that's your finance, marketing, HR, operations, all of that. So that if they ask a question where you have to evaluate something, you'll already have the disadvantages or the consequences. And it's very important to understand both the pros and the cons of some of the decisions that are made by the company in your case study. So kind of identifying all the problems will make it a lot easier. And lastly, always coming back to the case study. I know this is a very simple point, but a lot of the times students forget to refer back to the case study after answering the question. So you can explain your business theory really well, you could define it perfectly, you could give a perfect explanation, but if you forget to refer back to the case study, you lose a whole chunk of marks, because in the question also they state to refer to the case study. So it's very important after you're done with defining and explaining, it's very important to always show the connection to the case study. So when the moderator is going through your answers, they know the relationship between your answer and the case study and how it's relevant to the case study, which always helps you fetch a lot more marks. So always make sure that there is some sort of connection back to the case study. Now moving on to the sample question for section A that I have here, we're going to quickly break it down so that you have kind of a real world example for you to rely on for further explanation. So in this case, I selected section A. It's one of the easiest sections to really explain and understand. You can of course go and look at more past papers where you can look at section B and C that are mainly focused on the math aspect, but in this case I decided to choose section A for this video. So as I mentioned, for HL students, you select 2 out of the 3 and each question has 2 subparts, so A and B, A and B, A and B. So in this case, if you choose 2 questions, you're answering 4 subparts. Let's quickly go through it. For 1A, we have described the importance of 2 external stakeholders. As I mentioned previously, creating that stakeholder map will really come in handy because sometimes they just might ask you to, blatantly describe the stakeholders, and clearly that's given in this question. So here, since it's a 4 marker, very simply just state your stakeholders that you've identified beforehand when you are analyzing the case study, and then describe the role of those stakeholders. And then again, when you're talking about the importance, specifically that part, you want to connect it to the case study, right? And how are they important, how are they relevant? All of that will come into play when you connect it back to the case study. 1B, which says explain the role of promotion. Here, this is a 6 marker. So as I mentioned before, explain is the command term used. Here you want to first start off by defining all your business terms. So what promotion is, you want to talk about what marketing mix is. Promotion falls under marketing mix, which you learn in your business course. Start off by kind of introducing your promotion under marketing mix. And since this is a 6 marker, since you're giving a fully balanced viewpoint, you want to talk about the advantages and disadvantages about the role of promotion, you want to give a concluding statement, you want to give a complete essay format for these 6 markers. But don't waste too much time writing these, as you still have a lot more questions to go. So don't spend hours and waste all your time with these 6 markers. Spend a good amount of time and write it to the point, so all of your important points are checked off and it's very clear that your answer is perfect without going on and writing extra. That's really not required. 2A, which states describe 2 advantages of internal growth. Here again, since it's a 4 marker, you want to maybe define what internal growth is, then you want to state your 2 advantages that you'll again study in your business course, and then describe it. Again, the command term used here is describe, right? So once you state your advantages, you want to explain it a little bit more by talking about the relation to internal growth. Again, here it clearly says with reference to JAC, which is the case study. So again, once you mention your advantages, you want to take it back to your case study and connect it. Here specifically, you can talk about the advantages that you state in your answer. Are they present in the case study? If not, if it is, kind of explain all of that. Just essentially go into depth, give an 8-liner answer typically for 4 marks. 2B, which states explain the key functions of management. This is a 6-marker, so again you're giving a fully balanced answer. So here maybe start off by stating the key functions of management, kind of introduce what all of them are. Then since it says explain, you want to go a little bit deeper, talk about every single function that you're going to mention in your introduction, talk about its reference to the case study, which is also given in the question, and give a concluding statement at the end. Now I'm going to explain question 3 as well, but again you only select 2, so don't really bother writing an analysis for all 3 when you're only selecting 2. For question 3A, which has described 2 suitable sources of finance for the 3D printers in line 60, you want to start off by first stating the 2 suitable sources of finance, describing them, and then connecting it back to the case study. Here, for the, in case of the 3D printers, so connect it back. 3B, which is the last question for section A, which is a 6-marker, which states explain the role of ethics in John's businesses. Now, the question might seem very small and easy to answer, but it is a 6-marker, which means you really have to go in depth and kind of explain the whole thing. So here again, give your introduction, describe what ethics is, the role of ethics in businesses in general, specific to John's businesses. Here, since it says explain the role of ethics, you again want to talk about the advantages and disadvantages, kind of give a full balanced review, give a concluding statement, all of that sort of like an essay, but a shorter version. Very concise, very summarized, but you're also ticking off all the checklist points. And that is a very simple explanation of section A. Make sure to go through section B and C in your own time to kind of understand what type of questions come in section B and section C. As I said mentioned previously, the math part that comes into section B and C, you might want to take a look at it. And yeah, that makes us come to the end of today's video. You have officially completed the challenge. Thank you so much for watching this video. Of course, don't forget to subscribe, like this video, share this video, check out our Instagram page at IBspectrum, and also don't forget to visit our IBspectrum website, where we provide notes and resources for you to really deepen your knowledge on business management, or in fact any subject that you like. Go through it, go through the notes that we provide and the resources that we provide, and stay tuned for next week's video when I cover paper 2. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned.